It's about to go down with Marc and Cathey, a live coaching show about dropping ideas. Marc and Cathey coach and have conversations with brilliant idea creators who are reimagining the world through the expression of their words, thoughts, and actions.
Hey, everybody, you know it's about to go down because we're here. I'm Cathey Armillas.
And I'm Marc Williams, and we most definitely are here with this awesome individual who is a phenomenal speaker, a phenomenal person, and a person with a vision of being on the TED stage. Oh, she is already TED worthy. She is worthy. She is worthy. And now we want to take this idea and make it TED ready. Shauna-kaye Brown is talking to us as a transformation speaker, a transformation coach, and a transformation trainer. And she wants to speak about transformation and how everyone can manifest their greatness now. Shauna-kaye Brown, welcome to It's About to Go Down.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Marc and Cathey.
You're welcome. So tell us a little bit about this whole idea about how everyone can manifest their greatness now. Why are you the one talking about this, and why does the world need to hear this idea?
Awesome. So this idea that everyone can manifest greatness now, I believe the world needs to hear that. And I'm speaking from a place of personal experience. Growing up, I did not believe that was possible for me. And it wasn't helped by the fact that there were people around me who I loved and trusted who told me it wasn't possible. From the time I applied for college, I remember when I did my internship and I mentioned at the end of it what school I wanted to go to. And the lawyer that I worked with, he pretty much told me, aim a little lower. You know, the high school you go to, that's not a realistic vision. And I had that spirit in me where when you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to do everything in my power to show you that I can. And so when I applied for college, I only applied for this one institution and then spent the rest of the summer stressed out because I was not hearing anything. Eventually, I got in. And what that taught me was that you have to pay attention to the conversation that you're having with yourself. And that is why I am the person to tell individuals that they can manifest their greatness now, and not just to tell them, but to show them, because it starts from inside. And if the views and the opinions around you have told you throughout your entire life that you cannot do this, then you definitely need someone who will speak into your life and bring you to a point where there is little to no doubt that you have inherent powers and that you can realize what it is that you know deep within your heart that you want out of life.
Wow. Shauna-kaye. Woo! way to just come right out with this. Is so amazing. You know, Shauna-kaye, I love, Marc, thank you for opening the show with, like, we talked to Shauna-kaye and she is going to give a TED Talk. It's on her vision board. It's something that she's been talking about. So I love that we're going to spend this entire conversation, not so much just about the idea in general, but really more about how would it be fitting on a TED stage and what's the best way to get it TED ready. And so one of the things I want to tell you right out of the gate, Shauna-kaye, is like, there's this like weird space in the TED world. And I'm sure we've seen it over the years, right? Like, I just watched a TED Talk the other day, y'all. I cried. We're in the car, me and my husband are listening to this TED Talk, and I'm like looking over at him like, are you crying too? I'm crying right now watching this TED Talk. And I know that there's a lot of TED Talks out there that start to blur this line. It's like, is this a keynote? Is this a mini motivational speech? Or is this like a TED Talk, which is more in the realm of like, here's a new idea, or here's an idea with a new skin or new polish or new angle. And so out of the gate, I'm going to challenge us right now. Shauna-kaye, you already said you love a challenge. I know, Marc, you love a good challenge. I love a good challenge. Our challenge by the end of this conversation right here, I'm just going to say it. We have to make this TED ready, and to make it TED ready, it's going to have to be like something that when people hear, they don't go, yeah, I've kind of heard that before. It has to be something like, whoa, 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 whoa. So let's start with that. And so I'll put the first challenge out there. Marc, I'm thinking like, I love this idea. I think all three of us could like absolutely wildly agree that somebody in our life has told us that we couldn't do something and we've all proved them wrong. So what's the best way to position this idea? Like, how do we position it in a new way? How do we put a new spin on it? It's like, I'll just throw that out there at first. I know, asking the tough questions already, right? We just got to get right into it.
You started right off. Well, in order to answer that question, I like to delve a little bit into the story Shauna-kaye told about this person who said, aim a little lower.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And the fact that, and what really fascinated me about this story is that you took that and then only applied to that school. I mean, the nerve, the unmitigated gall.
Oh my gosh. I yes. I love that.
Sorry, Marc, as you mentioned that, I think as I listen to Cathey's question, I think this turns on sort of how you define greatness. Because I think that we've heard over and over that you can do it, you have what it takes. We have heard all of those cliches and they're true. But how do you define greatness? Because society will tell you that you are successful when you have acquired a master's degree or a PhD or something tangible like that. But is that really what greatness is? Does everybody's acme as it regards greatness, does it look the same way? And I submit that greatness is not so much about the sort of general view that society would want you to believe it is, but is that little step that you take that is intentional every single day towards a greater end. So when I say that everybody can manifest their greatness now, what I mean is that each day you can do something intentionally and deliberately that is taking you towards a predetermined goal.
When you say that, what stood out to me about how you originally worded the idea about everyone can manifest greatness, the word that stood out to me, Shauna-kaye and Cathey, was now.
Mm-hmm.
That really, and the way you just defined it, for me, really tapped into that. And I'm so glad that you started off with, really, I'm going to use this term, redefining greatness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I've come to love that term, redefining. Cathey was talking about watching a TED Talk, one of my favorite ones. And I know this is a cliche favorite, Brene Brown, but I felt like Brene really redefined what vulnerability means. So I like this thought of redefining what greatness means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I do. I love that. I do, Shauna-kaye, and I do think you're right. Like that, and that's always the challenge, right? In your head, you probably have it very clear. And in a short amount of time, we have to figure out like what's the best way to say that this idea. We have to show that this idea is not cliche, or it's a little bit, what's the different thing, right? Marc, though, I think you started hitting on something that, in my mind, sometimes I feel like in a TED Talk, for instance, I think the idea stands up on its own, and then a personal story will be, the thing that supports it. And then sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes it's this big story, and then the idea comes in later, and then you're like, oh, now everything pieces together because of what you're saying. I get it. And I in my mind, just as a knee jerk, I almost feel like this might be one of those times where it's like you're weaving it in after and saying, oh, okay, let's go back and rewatch the movie. Let's rewind and talk about what we heard or talked about. And these were the components to it. And this is how redefining greatness. So with that, then there has to be then there would be like, what's the signature story that's gonna do that? And I do love this aim a little lower story as well. But so I'd love to hear a little bit more about what you think about that, Shauna-kaye.
No, I really like that because again, it is relatable, but in this case is contextual. So a lot of people may come out and say, well, I come from a dysfunctional family, but then that's almost everybody, right?
Yeah.
All of our families have some level of dysfunction. So how do you make your mark on the world or step out of that mindset and begin to, as I said, manifest greatness now? And it's all about seizing the moment that you're in, because the only time that we have is right now. A few seconds ago, a few minutes ago when we started, that's already gone. And a lot of us spend so much time in that space of what could have, or should have, would have been, and we don't live right now. So we cannot manifest greatness in the present if we're dwelling on the past, or just they're dreaming about a future that we're not taking steps, active steps towards accomplishing. So when I was in high school, one of the requirements was that you would have to complete about, I believe it was like 2 weeks or something like that of community service. I don't remember the duration, but I completed community service at a law firm. And towards the end of it, I think it was the second to last day, the owner of the firm, he sat with me and he asked me what was my vision, what were my plans after high school. So I told him that I wanted to go to the University of the West Indies, which is in Jamaica. And he was shocked because of the high school I attended, no one from that school really went to this institution. Nowadays it's different, back then, not so much. And so he didn't think that was realistic. He thought I was dreaming. And so there's an institution called HEART in Jamaica, and it's a vocational institution. And so he said, why don't you consider HEART? That's more realistic. And I must say that I was offended. I was 15 years old and I was offended because I had never thought about going to HEART or doing any vocation. Nothing is wrong with that. But we all have our dreams and our visions, but that was not mine. So when he said that to me, something inside of me ignited. Something inside of me said I had to do everything within my power to make sure that what he suggested did not become my reality. And so when time came, a few years after high school, because I had to go to college, when time came for me to apply for university, I only applied for one. And this was just the weirdest thing to do, because not only was there no precedence because of the high school I came from, but I had no plan B. And that's kind of like my approach towards life. I don't have a plan B. I have a plan A, because I feel like the energy that I'm going to split to put some of it into plan B in case plan A doesn't work out, if I channel all of that energy into my plan A, the likelihood of it coming true is much higher. And what's the worst thing that could happen? I fail and then I have to try again or try something else. I won't die. So I just put all my eggs in one basket and I told nobody. My parents didn't know I applied to university in case I didn't get in, right? I didn't have to be embarrassed. So I waited all summer, and then towards the end of August of 2002, I believe it was, I got the call. No, it was 2005, my apologies. I got the call that I was accepted. And in subsequent years, I was tempted to go back and find this man and show him that he was wrong, but it was not worth it. Manifesting your greatness is not about going back to the naysayers and proving to them. But I must say that if channeled the right way, their negative words, their non-affirming words can serve as a catalyst for change. You don't have to prove anything to them, but ultimately you're proving to yourself that you have that inherent power to defy even those negative words.
Shauna-kaye, I have a question to ask you. Marc, I don't know if you're contemplating this, especially being an educator. And I started thinking about kids. I was thinking about kids your age, Shauna-kaye. And I was thinking about how special you probably were to be that young and to already be that convicted. How would your idea work for, like, and this is me just like trying to like make the idea as big and wide as possible, right? How would your idea work for somebody that doesn't have the same conviction that you do? Not many people say, I don't have any plan Bs. My plan B is my plan A. I mean, you know what I mean? Like what if there's, for instance, here, I'll give you a for instance, like, let's say there's a girl about your age, same age, that somebody told her that, and she's like, oh yeah, that's probably true. Nobody, how does she even figure out what her greatness is? Like, how does she even get to that point where like, no, I really want to do this thing. Like, some people are very wishy-washy with what greatness even is. I love that you started off saying, like, how do we even define it? I don't know. So what are your thoughts?
So that's an interesting question, because it is much easier to motivate someone or inspire someone who's already motivated. And I've always maintained that motivation comes from within. And one of the things that we have to be realistic about is the fact that you meet people at different points. And I know we like to say meet people where they are, but sometimes when you meet someone where they are, they're not ready for you. And that's a reality that we have to contend with. Because someone may come to you as a coach and say, Marc, I need coaching. I have this idea, I want to do this thing, but I don't know how to get there. But in your discovery call or your conversation with that person, you realize that there is all this suppressed trauma or pain, things that they didn't work through and things that they didn't deal with. And if you're honest, you may say to that person, I would love to help you, but I just don't feel like it's the right time. Maybe that person needs counseling or therapy. And so you have to sort of guide them in that way if you're honest with yourself. Your integrity will not allow you to take them on and take their money, knowing very well that what you have to offer is not yet what they need. Mm. And I say this because a young lady my age without that conviction may not receive it the same way. Very well say, you know what, you're right. And there isn't much you can do about that at that stage. And that is why I'm here. Because that young lady, wherever she is right now, she needs to hear my talk and know that whether or not you already feel the conviction, there is someone out there who was in this seat before and who was determined to not accept that. I want young ladies out there and young men too to know that you don't have to accept those negative words into your life. Nobody is going to wave a wand over you, but I like what Florence Kovalishin said in Your Word is Your Wand. Because in that book, what she's essentially saying is that you create your world with your words. And so when I get on that stage, what I want young people, young vulnerable ladies and men to know is that ultimately you have to rely on the word that comes from inside of you, because that's your wand. It is not the guy outside who thinks he knows everything. It is not even your parents sometimes. It is your word. And so I want them to dig inside and find that inner conviction that they don't know that they have yet. That's the greatness I'm talking about.
Boom. Okay. And so that was the piece I was looking for, Marc. It was like that's the component to the story. Oh my God, that was so beautiful, Shauna-kaye. Oh, I love it.
Hold up. Bring out the red dot. Bring out the red dot.
I was like, see, that was so, yeah, that's very, what you just said, Shauna-kaye, was the piece that I was looking for. It was that piece in the story. Because now I don't know if you heard this, Marc, but when she was explaining that, what I started hearing her, those would be the thoughts she would be saying to herself in this story. So the story would be blown out a little bit more, right? And it would be like, wow, oh, I guess, yeah, now that I think about it, nobody really has come from this high school and went to this college. But you know what? There's just something inside of me that really, I don't know. Something didn't feel right. Like, of course, these would be your words, not mine, right? There's something that you're wrestling with of like, no, I just really want to go there. And then, cause then you could tap back to that later and be like, I want everybody who gets to these points in their life when people tell them things and then they feel that uneasiness in their stomach, to challenge it and to be motivated by somebody that took a leap and know that it's possible. Anyway, Marc, I was going down that route when she said that. I was like, yes, that's the preface that I think was needed for this idea.
Well, I heard you say preface, and I also heard you say process, and that thought process I think could be invaluable for anybody to listen to you, because I think that's part of the difficulty with achieving greatness now or then is, what's the thought process? Like, I want the greatness, but when somebody says, yeah, aim a little lower, like, how do I get myself out of that rut? So I thought the idea of your thought process and how do you teach that, I think that was gold. I got to ask you a question in terms of the thought process, something that also intrigued me. You use the term offended. Mm-hmm. And I was curious, how does getting offended and using the feeling of getting offended help you to tap into manifesting your greatness. Because I can't even imagine how getting offended would actually drive you to your greatness.
Yeah.
That's such a good question, Mark, because normally when someone or something offends you, your first instinct is to respond, is to react to what they said. But at that time, I imagine, because I don't remember exactly, but I imagine at that time being a child, I would not have necessarily lashed out at an adult. And so I guess I had to find a way to channel my feeling of being offended. And that was the response, to just go for it and prove to this man who I didn't know from Adam before I went there to do my community service, prove to him that I could do it. But when you ask the question, how does being offended, how do you channel that into manifesting your greatness? It goes back to what I said about your word being your one, and understanding that you don't have control over what people do. You will never be able to do that. Trying to control people saying negative things about you, let me dress well, or let me speak a certain way, or let me invest or hang out in a certain crowd. There's still going to be someone who's not pleased with what you do. And so it's knowing that you can only control your response, your reaction. And so when someone offends you, rather than using your energy, your valuable energy to respond to them in the moment, and maybe nothing comes of it, start thinking, because we're talking about transformation, right? And transformation is an inside out process. It is not something that you dress up and you look different. That's not transformation. That's just a temporary change. When you go home later, you take it all off. But it's an inside out process. So it's knowing within yourself that, you know what? I am not going to expend my energy to respond to this man or this woman, but I am going to use what I would have used there, that fuel, to fuel the fire that I know I have inside of me. And that comes with practice. It's not an overnight process, but that's how I want people to start thinking, that because I have control over what I do and only over what I do, I am going to use my energy wisely. And that's how it ties in to me with manifesting your greatness now.
Wow. Again, beautiful. Wow. I love that, using, like, I don't know if that would be the correct translation, but offensive energy to using it to build. It's really using it really to build more of what you know, build your dream, or build upon what you wanted. I love that. Mark, I have a question for you, like, just because I think that everything that we're throwing at her, obviously she's thought about this, and obviously this means something to her, and it's really good. I love, the question for you is, like, I love where you were going with this process, right? Because I think, to Shauna-kaye's point, everybody's not ready for everything, right? But what would be our biggest way that we could get people to just stop for a second, be aware of the world that we're living in our world, and the things that we might want in order for us to be great, or what might make us feel like a success? And then how do we make those little, I mean, you said it before, Shauna-kaye, it's like you're making these intentional steps. It's something that you're doing right now for something that might manifest. You're manifesting it for later. So Mark, what would that be? Like, I feel like that's the process that we're trying to teach in this TED Talk. It's like, hey, be aware. First, be aware that, you know, of what greatness means to you.
I think it's part of it is being aware of what greatness means to you. And I'm going to use this word now, being aware of what greatness means to you now in this moment. You know, because I go back to, if it's a process, sometimes process is about the end goal.
Right.
But if we stick to what Shauna-kaye has, and that word, it's like, what could I be doing right now that would be the definition of greatness? And to Shauna-kaye, to your point earlier, like, even when this professor offended you, manifesting greatness at that moment was refueling your energy, or rechanneling your energy.
Yep.
That was greatness. And the ability, oh man, hold on. I'm getting all fired up. The ability in that moment to say, this just happened. Do I do this? Do I do that? Do I take the red pill or the blue pill? Right? Which one is most aligned with my definition of greatness now?
I love that.
Wow.
I love that because what you're saying is the answer would not have been Shauna-kaye, right? To argue with this person. And that's not channeling the fuel in the right direction. Instead, it was like, oh, I'm going to go apply to just the one school and I'm going to channel the energy towards that. And I love something that you said before, Shauna-kaye, because now this makes sense to what you're saying, Marc, is if there were two ways, and of course, in every situation, there's maybe going to be multiple ways, not always, not just two, but if there's multiple ways to be great in any one moment, I love what you said before about like, you don't really have your plan B is your plan A. You're basically saying you're taking all that fuel that Marc's talking about and you're putting it towards the thing that you want. That makes sense to me now, why you got the one school that you had applied for. Because if you had applied to 10 schools and put minimal effort on each one and just been like, oh, it's a numbers game. I want to apply to 10 schools. But it was almost like you took all of that energy. I started seeing it, and I started seeing this physical manifestation, Marc, when you were talking of this energy, and you're like, nope, I'm putting all this energy to that, which is what I believe is greatness. Totally makes sense that you got in. It just is like, it makes sense. Like in hindsight, right?
I'm so sorry, but I'm so cheesy at this moment. I got Eminem in the brain. All I just heard was one shot, one opportunity.
You only had one shot, one opportunity.
Yes.
Oh boy, there's always going to be a rap in there somewhere, right, Marc?
Yes. But I say that to tie along with what I was saying is, again, the courage. And maybe it's not the courage, maybe it's the clarity of what greatness meant, that you only chose one shot. I mean, I'm going to use the word courageous. I mean, how many people could put that one egg in a basket? Right. And that's because a lot of people see that as risk. You didn't see it as risk. You saw it as greatness.
And you know what I noticed just now, and it's not even anything novel, it's just something I noticed. I think what would have fueled that decision at the time was that I still had a goal. I had a goal, which is that I wanted to go to university. And I remember what Earl Nightingale said in The Stranger's Secret. He says, a man without a goal is like a ship without a rudder. And I feel like if you don't have an end goal in mind and you just have this idea and then someone else comes and gives you another idea, and in your mind, you're now looking at both of them and you might find yourself vacillating between two ideas, trying to figure out which one should I go with. But none is really hard. None is really more important to you than the other because you don't have a goal. I had an end goal in mind because remember, my mother said the only way out of poverty is through an education. So when I thought about an education, I thought about getting a degree. The vocational school didn't offer that. So in that context, it was an easier decision for me. But I'm pretty sure a part of my 15-year-old self was saying, maybe he has a point. But that was a very small part because I don't remember having that conversation with myself at all, but it might have happened. So the point I'm making is that even as you're thinking in the context of manifesting greatness now, having a goal in mind will certainly help you with that. And so again, we've heard about goal setting in so many contexts. I mean, Jim Rohn has done extensive work on goal setting. We know that the SMART goals mechanism is something that everybody knows. You've heard it in every room. But setting goals is imperative if you want to manifest greatness now, because every time you're thrown off course or every time a distraction comes or someone comes up to you with an unsolicited opinion, you can remind yourself, what is your end goal? How does this align with it? And if it doesn't, discard it and let it be. So I think that that will help you as you're on that trajectory to manifesting greatness in the moment. What is my goal? Because the average person is going to be affected by other people's input.
I wrote this down when you were talking, Shauna-kaye. Because it's basically, you're breaking it down to two parts. What is your, and if you were to use another term to not say goal, I would just say, what is your great, right? Like, what is your great, or what's your greatness? And what do you do now to walk towards it? Like, what can you do in this moment to walk towards it? Because it's the only two things that you're really talking about, right? It's you're like, you don't care what any person, like what, Marc, your great could be something else, which is your goal, right? Some goal that you might have. And then what can you do right now to walk towards it? Even if it's something that won't manifest for 10 years, like what can you do? It could be something you want for your kids, or so, whatever. I don't know. That's kind of what I took from it.
Oh, all right.
I saw you smiling already, Marc. Let's
build it. First of all, I love the question, what is your great? Because people ask all the time, what is your goal? Right? People, goal setting. I wrote down the term greatness setting.
Ooh, I love that. I love that, because what is your great? And you could even explain it like this, Shauna-kaye. It could be like, it would be great if I could, like, it would be great if I went to, right?
I love that.
Right?
Yes.
It's the play on the words of, it would be great if I could go to this college. It would be great. And again, it shows that it taps back to that thing that you talked about. Like, you're not in control of what the rest of the world is in control of. So it's just like, even those words make it like, it would be great. That's what so it doesn't mean I'm going to be destroyed if it doesn't happen. It means I'm going to pick myself up and figure out another way to do it. I don't know. I like that.
Yeah. First of all, Shauna-kaye, I'm such a big fan of yours. And one of the reasons why I'm such a big fan of yours is you are one of the most well-read people I have ever met. I mean, and Cathey, you don't even know half of it. Shauna-kaye drops book titles like you don't know.
It's like, I don't even know you that well, Shauna-kaye, and it's like oozes out of you. Like, it's great. It's such a great thing. It's phenomenal.
It's so amazing. And that's why, and Cathey, I'm so, listen, I always tell you, you're so brilliant. And when you ask, what is your great? It was like, that's the word. That's the word. And I know we started off with manifest your greatness, but as Shauna-kaye, as you were talking about goal, I was like, so many people talk about goal setting and goal this and goal that. And Cathey, the genius that she is, she's always talking about, how do we say something different?
Yeah.
And getting people to think about, man, what is your greatness? How would you define greatness? What is your great? Like, I don't know how many people are thinking about it that way. And so that's what appeals to me about just a different take on this whole talk.
Mm-hmm.
Man.
Yeah, I can definitely see something coming out of that. I've never heard that before. That's very interesting. And it's perspective. It's a sort of in the moment perspective. So if this becomes a thing where each time you have to make a decision, even if it's a quick one, that's the first thing that you think, the great decision. What would be great? What would be my great in this situation? I think that's going to do a lot for changing the perspective, even in a quick moment.
Oof. I love, Shauna-kaye, how you even took that further. It's like, what is my great decision? Like, what is, like, you using that adjective as the, as the
noun.
Yeah, as a noun, exactly, as the concept, right? I love it. I like that a lot.
So I'm curious, Shauna-kaye, how do you get people to care about defining their greatness, about setting their greatness?
I think it goes down to, it comes down to one of the fundamental questions that a lot of people ask. And we might think that this is characteristic of only driven people, but a lot of people, even those who don't appear to be driven, ask this one question: Why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when people walk around and they're just destitute, or they seem like they have no life in them, or they seem like they're wasting their lives away, it is because they feel like they have no sense of either belonging or purpose. So they're just existing. How you get people to care about this is to help them to realize that there is something in you, there is a place for you, and there is something that you are to do that no one else can do. There's a place that you are to fill that no one else can fill. It's helping them to come to that realization. And ultimately, they don't have to receive it. So that is where the frustration comes in a lot of times, because you may have an idea and you think sharing it with them in the way that it makes sense in your head is going to translate. And sometimes it's just not received. Because again, it also comes down to where is that person at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And bearing in mind that we're not called to everybody. Each of us were called to a different set of people. And it's basically a travesty if we don't get up and walk into that calling. And so I believe that in helping people to understand why it is so important to manifest their greatness now, it is to help them to see that irrespective of how you feel right now, hear me out. You have the capacity in you to do great things. But let's have a conversation first. I want to know how you feel and what you think about your ability or your capacity, because there's some people who think, oh, you don't understand. It's not going to happen for me. And that's why our stories are so important. And that's why I share a lot of my story, because people will see what they see now and think that it has always been this way. But there is a story behind that. And it's helping people to connect on that level, to know that other people have done it before, I can do it too. And so through stories, of course, 15 to 18 minutes on the stage is not going to allow me to share all those anecdotes, but it's just at least helping them to open their minds to listen. That's the first step. And once you are willing to listen, then we can take the next step for me to show you how. And everybody's journey is going to look different. Some people's journeys are longer than others, but it's knowing within your heart that it is possible. That's all. I just want you to believe it is possible. If you have to tell it to yourself over and over and over again until your belief kicks in, then do that.
Speechless. I'm speechless.
Wow, Shauna-kaye, I don't know what you did, but Marc's never speechless. No, I love that. I love this last thing that you said too, is like, this whole thing goes back to knowing in your heart that it's possible, and everybody wants to do something great, right? It's that it goes back to the question of why am I here? I love using great as the center of everything that you're talking about too, is like, because there's so many layers to this. There's great in the moment. When I think about greatness, if I think about the word greatness, that always makes me feel like it's one big thing out there, as opposed to like, you're talking about a bunch of mini greats, right? Like, it's like, there's a mini great here. It would be great if I could get my sister to blah, like, it would be great if I were to get into this class. It would be great. So there's a lot of little mini greats along the way. It's not the greatness that you speak of is not only the big thing. It's the big thing, right? It's all the things that whatever you think makes your life great, whatever fulfills your purpose, whatever your heart of hearts wants to do that would be great, is what you should be aligning yourself to and manifesting immediately, is what you're saying, right, Shauna-kaye?
I like that, because I think it takes into consideration the compound effect. It is about the small steps. It doesn't miss that. And that's a big part of manifesting your greatness now, is appreciating that it's not about immediate gratification. It is about appreciating every single step. And it goes back to what Marc was saying at the beginning about process. You have to appreciate the steps in between. And we live in a sort of microwave society where people want it and they want it now. And even when they see someone on the stage doing something great, they call them an overnight success.
Yeah.
But they don't know that that person was working for 10 or 15 or even 20 years behind the scene when nobody knew who they were to get to that point. It's this idea that people have that things are happening overnight, but a lot of great people that you see out there, they have taken hundreds of thousands of small steps. So it's letting them realize that the ultimate greatness is preceded by being great every single moment leading up to that point. And being great is also your response to situations, your response to adversity.
Yep.
Being great is about taking responsibility.
Yeah.
And I'm going to tread up on some other ground here, like, for example, the war with Russia and Ukraine now. You, Cathey, or Marc, or myself, we didn't necessarily do anything directly to contribute to that war. But how can we take responsibility for it? Some people may say, well, Shauna-kaye, that's ludicrous. What do you mean take responsibility? Taking responsibility doesn't mean that I was instrumental in weaponizing the war, anything like that. Taking responsibility could mean that if there is a GoFundMe account or something where they're collecting money to help the people who have been displaced because of the war, I could contribute to that. That's my responsibility in the situation. That's being great. So being great in the moment is also about response. How do you respond to situations, whether you cause them or not? Being great is about choosing responsibility over blame. Being great is to understand that forgiveness is not just for you, but it's also for the other person. Because, some people say forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you. That's selfish. Being great is about being selfless. And there are still people who hope that you will forgive them for the wrong that they knew they did. And so when you exclude them by saying forgiveness is just for you and not for the other person, then you don't give them that opportunity to feel like they're being forgiven. So being great is not always something that is going to change the world, but it's about how you respond to the plethora of situations that you face every single day.
I am so glad about what you just said, because earlier, I think you used the term showing, right? And then we just talked about process. And one of the things I was going to be very curious about was, how do you be great? How do you become great in the moment, right? Because that's so critical to your idea. And then you said these two things. And Cathey, I want to know how you feel about these two things as far as process. Mm-hmm. Being great in the moment means, step one, choosing responsibility over blame. Mm-hmm. And step two, acknowledging that forgiveness is not just for you, but it's for the other person. Mm-hmm. That stood out to me as, in order to be great in the moment, I mean, you really have to be so in tune with your thoughts. Mm-hmm. And to give us something to think about in the moment is a part of the process that works for me. And Cathey, I don't know what you're thinking about that, but that really helped me in terms of process.
Yeah, because she applied it to something. She showed you something like forgiveness, right? Mm-hmm. Like she used that as an analogy to, like, how could you be great in that moment? Like, what's the great? What is your great? What's the great, right? What's the greatest thing that you could do in that moment? I love, Marc, that you kind of boil it down to, like, how do you be great in every moment? How are you being great in every moment? I think one of the things, I've heard this saying before. I think people use it in recovery a lot. It's, what is it exactly? It's like, do the next right thing, right? Have you heard that before? Like, do the next right thing. Yeah. And I think that there's an alignment here that Shauna-kaye, that we've kind of boiled down to, that it's like, you're choosing great in that moment. Like, but you get to choose. Everything is your choice. Your choice of what the great thing is. Maybe for one other person, the satisfaction of telling somebody off is the great thing in that moment. Yes, because they feel like what the great thing is to tell that person off so that they don't put down another kid or something, you know what I mean? And they feel like that's the great thing to do. Maybe for somebody else, like Shauna-kaye, it's to, like, take that energy and put it into what her great thing was, which was getting into the one school she applied for. I think one of the things that's really starting to, like, boil up for me, Shauna-kaye, is that, in this space where you're saying being great is taking the reins. Being great is being proactive about A, what is great to you, and then B, what steps do you need to do? What are the great steps you need to do towards your great? I know there's a lot of greats. Gosh, it's like we're full of greats right now, but you know, this analogy, if I'm going to stick with this kind of concept here, it's like, what can I do in this moment to walk towards that? Like, what's the best thing that I can do to walk towards whatever I deemed as my great? That's kind of what I'm taking from it. And I think that I really do see a great story. I do think you need a great story to play this out. And maybe it's this story, or maybe you have another one that might be better. But I really do see this story, because I think there's many moments in this story where you could kind of pop out of the story for a minute too, and kind of explain it along the way. And be like, I had many moments that I had, like in this moment, okay, now I'm in this moment. What do I do next? Do I apply for a bunch of schools? Okay, now the summer's going on and I haven't heard anything. Do I still sit here and do nothing? Or like, what's my next great move? Or, you know, so I think you could take, like comedians do. Comedians tell one little tiny story. It takes a long time because they're going everywhere, right? I think that's the kind of way that you could build this in, as opposed to just being like, here's a story, and then here's what we get from it.
Yes, I like the former idea of better. It's the one story that you're pulling out parts of it and sort of expounding, and then coming back to the story to sort of end with, this is how it all turned out. So I really like that.
Yeah, but then you're able to go back and be like, oh, you know, here were all the reveal moments. Here were the moments that were critical to this. I like that. I think it already in my mind is starting to feel like a new idea, because now it's like, and I like the power that you're offering everybody. I think that this is an idea that starts to open up for everybody, because everybody has the power to think about what's great for them.
Yeah. Cathey, I have a question for you as the TED Talk extraordinaire. Have we told people that Cathey has watched 10 million TED Talks?
Okay, that's a little bit of an exaggeration. Just a tad of an exaggeration.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
I don't think we're up to 10 million yet, but
yeah.
a lot of TED Talks for sure.
Yes, you are. I was curious, for the purposes of this conversation, Cathey, how important or how critical is it in a TED Talk to include evidence, right? And I don't just mean like our own personal stories, right? But how important is it to include evidence? And if it really is critical, what kind of evidence could Shauna-kaye consider for this talk?
God, Marc, it's almost like you know me or something. And it's almost like you know what I teach. Like, you know, Shauna-kaye, one of the things that I teach in especially in, like, I had a program that I created called How to Rock a TED Talk. And when I watched 1,000 TED Talks at the beginning, and I kind of reverse engineered them. And one of the biggest pieces was I kept seeing over and over that people always had some kind of great supporting evidence. And sometimes the evidence would be in social proof. So it might be a story from somebody else. Sometimes it would be in psychology, or sometimes it would be in this like unknown weird fact that we didn't like know. And so it's interesting. And then, but it supported what was there. And so, Marc, that's a phenomenal thing to bring to the table. Is the story good enough? And I think you're right. It probably isn't. I think the story is a motivation, but then there's different types of people, right? That learn different ways. And some people just need to be motivated, and that's it. They'll go figure it out. They don't need any other information. They're like, you just motivated me, done deal. I'm going to go do what you said. And then there's other people that need more. And I would say, Shauna-kaye, that in this space, I would be doing some research. I would start with psychology. It's my favorite place to start. My favorite place to start is like, why do people, I would start with these questions. I would go research, and I'd be like, why do people want to do great things? Like, what is it? Why do people feel like they want to do something that feels accomplished or great? Or why do people want to be successful? I would start in those spaces to try to get down to the humanistic desires of that. And you'll probably find other things that might support it. But I think you're right, Marc. It's like, how do you support this with like, I mean, you could, some of my favorite TED Talks are by psychologists like Dan Gilbert, you know, the surprising something of happiness, surprising joy of happiness, something. Anyways, Dan Gilbert, he's like a psychologist. And I love it because everything that he talks about will go back to like psychology. He talks about how the fifth Beatle was like super happy, way happier in his life of not being part of the Beatles than actually being part of the Beatles. And then he breaks it down psychologically. Yeah. It's a really good talk, but but you're right, Marc, to your point, you could make a statement and then be like, you could make a statement, for instance, I think it was said before, everybody wants to do something great, or everybody wants, how did you say it, Shauna-kaye? Like everybody wants to feel important or something in that space, same space, right? Everybody wants to
find out why they're here, what's their purpose.
Oh, why they're here, what's their purpose, right? Yeah. So everybody wants to find that. So it's one thing to say it, but then it's another to say, this is how deeply rooted that statement actually is. Psychology kind of tells us, even if you're the fifth Beatle and you missed out on being like one of the Fab Four, your life was still happier. And here's the scientific reason why. Boom. Like that was very fascinating, you know, very, very, very fascinating. And so I definitely would look for some supporting evidence. Like what are these like theories of things of why of some of these spaces to just support what you're saying?
No, actually, I totally agree with you, because as Marc was talking about that, I was thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And because I'm actually working on a book called Discover the Power in You, I'm writing it. And, you know, at the zenith of his hierarchy is self-actualization. And I sort of have a spin on that, which is something that I believe could potentially be another idea again. I don't know if there's work out there on it. But for me, the zenith is not necessarily self-actualization, but I'm sure those who would counter my argument, they would have strong argument to counter it, because they might say it's a subset of. But I think that the ultimate acme is contribution, because I feel like when you get to the point of self-actualization, what's next? And that's why some people hit that plateau, and then after that, you either don't hear anything about them or they're just here. And I feel like the reason people like Oprah and Beyonce and all the people who give back so much, the reason they continue to do that is because of the feeling that you get when you contribute, the response that people give to you when you contribute, when you build a school in Africa or you help someone in South America or something like that. That's just my observation and my appreciation for all of it. I feel like the contribution is an ongoing thing. And human beings, I think we have a proclivity to just get to a point where we feel like we've hit a ceiling or a lid, and then you either get bored or you're just there. That's where the plateau is. But if you're constantly contributing and finding new ways to contribute, you remain relevant and you feel like you are making a difference.
Like every step of the way, you're redefining your greatness over and over and over again. By the way, I do agree. I think that's a whole nother red circle talk.
Yes, it will be.
To blow up self-actualization and not replace it, but to build upon it the next level. Yeah, and as soon as you said something, and Cathey, I think you'll really appreciate this. Anytime I hear people say, some people would probably disagree with me on this, my brain is like, oh, I want to hear it.
I'm ready.
I want to hear it.
I want to hear it.
Yeah. Because they will say, people say sorry, Cathey.
No.
People will say that, when you get to the point of self-actualization, isn't that what gives you the capacity to contribute? But it's still a choice. You don't have to. Yeah. So I feel like the zenith is, what do you do after you get to self-actualization? And in a way, there really isn't a zenith, because the contribution is ongoing.
Well, our friend Lou Raja, who was on our season 1, episode 1, You know,
Wow.
he is one of the wisest people that I know. He's been a good friend of mine for many, many, many years. And I will never forget, Shauna-kaye, something that he told me. And, you know, some of this stuff, I don't know where he got this from. So I'm sure I'm going to credit him, but I don't know where he got it from. But he's from Africa. So a lot of his wisdom is just, you know, African wisdom, right? But I remember he told me this about 10 years ago. He's like, there's 4 S's in life, right? There's survival, there's stability, and there's success. And a lot of people think that you end at success, but actually the 4th S is the most important, and it's significance. And it's the same thing that you're talking about with, right? I know this is Lou telling me this, and my mind's like,
wow.
And that's the same thing. It blows up the
awesome.
self-actualization thing, right? It's like people look for that significance, and it's in contribution. And that's why and then of course he told me the whole, when you get up to the top, you send the elevator back down, right? So that's what significance is. And so that, yeah. But I think I'm glad that we kind of took a little left turn on this for a second, because this is the kind of stuff that makes your idea deep, is to be able to go really deep into this and to find that one little area that you want, that pocket that you do want to talk about, and say, hey, if we pull the curtains back, this is the reason behind it. And this is what I think. And it could be your own thoughts. I don't advise people to get on a stage and only reference other people's work. What does Shauna-kaye think about this? But then, of course, I mean, there's also, you don't want to stand on a stage and say, hey, this is an awesome idea, and it's awesome only because I say it's awesome. There's like no other proof in the world for this, but I believe it's awesome, so everybody should sign up, you know? So there's a balance in there, right?
Awesome. I was going to ask you, well, first of all, I got to share this random thought, because you were all talking about the Beatles, and I thought, forgive me, if you were to ask Randy Jackson of the Jacksons, is he greater than Michael? What would he have said?
That's a great question, right? I mean, we all kind of know what the rest of the world would say, but
but the fifth Beatle said he lived a better life.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Randy might ask you. It all depends on what you mean by greatness.
Right. Yeah. See. Ooh, back where we started. Define that greatness. Let's get to that. What is that's? But Shauna-kaye, that's the right question.
Yes.
Right? Because with the fifth Beatle, with Randy Jackson, like you're saying, the thing that in hindsight, I was like, ooh, I really dodged a bullet with that, was like all of the bad things that came along with it. And everybody naturally assumes it's all of the good things, the things that they deem to be success, making lots of money, being, famous, whatever. Right. But somebody else values it in a different way. It's like, no, I love my peaceful, awesome life. Nobody's writing bad things about me in the paper all the time. And people aren't attacking my character all the time or accusing me of things, So, yeah.
Sorry. I just had to get trivia for a moment. But Shauna-kaye, I love the way that you redefined it and capped it the way you capped it off. It's so much about the definition, and we go back to that. It's about defining what greatness means to you. And I think that gives you even greater strength in the moment to become your great.
Yeah.
Right. But it starts with defining your greatness and then taking that thought process to be great in the moment. That's very powerful. Very powerful.
I don't know about you guys. If we played a game really quick, let's play a game. Shauna-kaye, I like to play games. I love this. My favorite thing to do. Let's play a game.
I was waiting for it to come.
I know. It's like, wait, where's the game? Let's play a game really quick, because I think this is always like the best way to measure an idea in the present moment, like how we feel it, like it fits. I'm going to play a game that you're going to explain this to a 7-year-old. How would you explain this to a 7-year-old? How would you explain this idea?
Okay, so It's a little
Everybody gets to answer, Shauna-kaye. So if you want to go first, you can. If you want to put
let Marc go first. Marc, you go first.
Oh man.
Or you guys can put me on the spot. It doesn't matter. It's like whoever.
I was like, Shauna-kaye was ready to answer. Go ahead, girl.
No, I was like, let her go first. She's our guest. Like, we have to tackle the hard questions.
The floor is yours, Shauna-kaye.
All right, then I accept. So with a 7-year-old, it could be tricky, but I always like to start with seeking to understand what's going on in the person's mind first. So I might start with a question or two, because it depends. There are some 7-year-olds who are advanced because their parents teach them to say affirmations and say, I'm a king and I'm strong and that sort of thing. And so when you come to them with something like that, they may think I'm Superman, I can take over the world. And for me, speaking to a 7-year-old about manifesting greatness is letting that little child, boy or girl, know that you can do a lot of things you put your mind to. I'm not going to say anything like what we're always told, but I will tell that child that you can do a lot of things that you put your mind to. And some of those things are not going to work out the first time or the second time or the third time or even the 10th time. But one of the ways to manifest greatness in the moment is to keep trying. If you feel in here that this is something that you can do, failing at it the first time or the 10th time doesn't mean you can't do it. It just means you have to keep trying. And children, a lot of children know sports and they can identify with sports. So I would tell them about Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant, or someone who's really good at sport that they may know about. And let them know that, ask them a question, do you think that the first time Michael Jordan tried to put the ball in the basket, it went in? And hear what they have to say. They may say yes. If they say yes, of course, I'm going to quickly explain to them that he probably did it 300 times before it went in the first time. And even after it went, he kept on doing it. And I remember a previous Toastmaster that I worked with, Isaiah, and he said Michael Jordan had a ridiculous work ethic, and that never left me. So when explaining that to a 7-year-old, that's a story that I will share with them to help them to understand that even you can do it, and you're going to try different things. Do you remember when you tried to walk and you fell 1,000 times? Did mommy tell you, don't bother to try walking, just creep around? She let you fall because one day she knew that you were going to walk, and now run around. I can't keep up with you. So manifesting greatness now is about just knowing that you keep trying at something, even if you fail. If you feel in your little heart that you can do it, you should keep going.
I love that. I know, that's so great. I'm like, wow. It's a great way to explain it to a 7-year-old.
The mic just got dropped.
The mic got dropped, but Marc, it's still, do you want to go or you want me to go next?
You know what? Here's what I'll say. Shauna-kaye, first of all, you made me think about nicknames. And at first I was thinking about, what nickname would a child give themselves? But I thought about my own children at home, and I thought about the different things that they're really into, right? Like, even if they're just in the video, I should say even if they're in the video games. I wonder if I would ask my youngest son, what would it mean to be great at this game? And my assumption is that he would talk about some skill somewhere down the line. And then I would love to get into a conversation with him about what was great about what you just did in the game. Because following along with what Shauna-kaye said, it's not just about, it's part of it is defining the end goal greatness, but a part of it is identifying what you're doing great right now.
Yeah.
And that's how I would talk to a 7-year-old about greatness. What would make you feel really good if you could do it right now? Yes. And what makes you feel really good about what you just did?
I love that.
God, I love that, Marc. Jeez. Woo, another 2 mic drops in a row. Now I'm like, all right, I think it's time to close out the episode. Because Marc and Shauna-kaye just said everything that was possible. No, honestly, I'm just going to say the first thing that knee jerked to me before either one of you spoke. And Marc, it's a little bit almost in the same place of what you just said. But my initial thought was like, if I was talking to a 7-year-old, what I would probably say is, what would be great for you? Like, what are some of the things that are your dreams? Like, what would be great if this happened? Like, what would be that? And then I would ask them, what could you do to do that?
That's good.
Like, just as simple as that. Like, but I also really love Shauna-kaye. You're like asking them questions. Like, that's a good thing, like baseline it. So maybe that's something you should think about for your audience too, is like, how do you baseline an audience in a rhetorical way, right? You can't do it. You're not going to be able to talk to everybody that's hearing your TED Talk, but in a rhetorical way, maybe you can start. That's a good thing, because maybe you could start off your talk knowing that you have to kind of baseline where we're all at and get us all on the same page first. Because maybe some of us grew up with saying affirmations. Maybe some of us grew up in a household where our parents said mean things to us, just the opposite. Maybe people were constantly telling us we were no good. Right. So it's good. So that's what I got even from what you said. And Marc, I loved it. Like, I always see you having these conversations with your kids, and I'm always like, Marc has these dinner time, at the table conversations with the family, and it's always awesome. So I can't wait to hear what comes out of this one. But
it's about to go down at dinner.
It's about to go down at dinner tonight, right? Well, with that said too, Shauna-kaye, I would love to kind of circle back to where we started. And, we started with your idea, and it was like, you have the power to manifest greatness, right now at the moment. And then we've had this entire conversation. What's changed since we started talking? Like, what things have been great in your mind?
So many things, to be honest. You have this idea, and you know that when it comes out initially, people are inspired because it sounds good and they're motivated, but there's more. Because if my goal is to reach people who feel hopeless, who may have been hearing negative things all their lives, how do you even get past that block for them to receive the message? The ones who just want to hear something positive now, it's easy. But it's the people who are there in the back who are saying, doesn't matter what you say, this is what I've been told all my life. How do you get to them? This conversation has made me think about that. And when I go back to look at this, I'm looking at it from a different vantage point, because I need to know how to really connect with those people, because they're the ones who need to transform their minds so that they can change their lives. The other thing is just to look at greatness in its context, not even greatness, which is a big thing, but being great now, looking at that in the context. It's not something I thought about before this conversation, at least not in that way. So that's certainly something I will go back and look at. And I think that's sort of like the crux of the whole thing, isn't it? How can you be great in this moment right now? What does that look like for you? And it's okay if it is different from everybody else around you, that's fine. Just want to know what it looks like for you and what are you going to do about it? The same question that Cathey is asking the 7-year-old, we can really ask every single person that. What can you do now? What great thing can you do now to get to that end goal? So that's another thing that jumps out at me that I will definitely be thinking about as I put this together. And then the final thing is knowing that even though I have these ideas and I feel like they're great ideas, having that proof to buttress the ideas is what's going to take it to the next level. Because like you said, there are different people in the audience, and there are some people who respond to empirical data. They feel like there's more, validity or credibility to the person speaking. So I appreciate that. I've always known that empirical evidence is good, but now within the context of this talk, I know that that's something that is a must-have. But of course, not to the point where it stifles my idea.
Yes. Oh, the way that you wrap that whole thing up, Shauna-kaye. Wow. Wow. Exactly. Phenomenal. Oh my gosh. I love that. Yeah, Shauna-kaye, you actually said something that I wanted to kind of close out for our audience too, because, in this, you are witnessing right now in this very moment, right? You're witnessing Shauna-kaye working on her TED Talk. Now that doesn't mean it's done, right? It just means that you took a huge step. Shauna-kaye, this conversation needs to continue like this. Like if this were a coaching session that we're going all the way to the stage, This is day one, but it's an important day one. And so I want everybody to know that all of these things that you just recounted and said it changed how you were thinking about, this is important. And this doesn't even mean it's the end. It just keeps building and building and building to ultimately you're standing on a stage and then somebody's listening to your talk and they're like, wow, it's so deep, but seems so simple, but all the work was done here. So thank you for explaining that so eloquently. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Shauna-kaye, thank you for being on our show. This is the most important question. There is a TED organizer out there right now that's watching. I know it. Somebody out there is watching and they want to help manifest this dream that you have to be on the TED stage. So how will they reach you? It's a big question.
All right. So organizers out there who want to help me manifest my greatness on the TED stage, you can find me on almost every social media platform as Shauna-kaye Brown Speaks. So that's Shauna, Shauna, the letter K, Brown as in the color, Speaks with an S. So that's my Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And then on LinkedIn, I'm Shauna-kaye Brown. That's basically it. I have a website as well, ShaunaKayeBrownSpeaks.com.
So anybody out there watching that wants to get in touch with Shauna-kaye Brown for any reason, hopefully to get her on a TED stage, please do so. Shauna, thanks for being on our show. Anybody that's watching, if you have an idea that you're like, oh, I understand that my idea doesn't have to come to the world in its most polished version, and that Marc and Cathey can help me, rub this off a little and dust it off and find out what that polish really might be, reach out to us. Our website is it'sabouttogodown.show.com. Or if you know somebody, like you might have talked to somebody and been like, you should definitely give a TED Talk. You should talk to Marc and Cathey. That's a great start. Shauna-kaye, thanks for being on our show and for everybody. And until next time, because we always do this. We did it here. And for when you do give your TED Talk, Shauna, it will be about to go down.
Wow. Thank you for having me. This is where it started. Thank you.